Uh, Thank you so much for coming and spending this evening with us. I know it's a weeknight, but thanks so much for coming. Today we have the pleasure of having Robert here with us. He's from Portland in Oregon, and he's going to share his story, his work, and life in architecture with us.
Okay.
Robert has been traveling in India for a couple of weeks, and he's here in Pune. And this is going to be more informal than usual. Robert has said that he'd be happy to break down or discuss projects in the middle. So if you have questions regarding a project while it's being shared, feel free to interrupt. Yeah. Thanks, Robert, for being here.
Thank you. Yesterday I gave a talk and I finished and I realized I gave the worst lecture of my life last night. What happened was I was told that you had 2 hours to speak, and the slide presentation I put together, I didn't really know for sure whether I was going to be doing any talking whatsoever on my trip to India. So the first week I was here, I put together a slide presentation, and I gave it to a group of students in the basement, and it took a little more than 2.5 hours. So I said, oh, now I'm going to have to cut some things out, but I didn't want to cut any of the images out. So I thought, well, I'll just talk a little faster, go through things a little bit faster, and I'll cut that half hour down, and I'll be right at 2 hours. So last night I'm talking away, and I decided to check my watch to see if how I'm doing time-wise, and I see the minute hand is getting closer and closer to 12, and I'm not even halfway done. So I start speeding things up, moving through as fast as I can, skipping some of the things I wanted to talk about, and finally get through, and I see the minute hand just hits 12. I said, wow, I got done in time. And I asked, well, I know I've used up the 2 hours, but if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. And someone said, it's 7 o'clock, you still have a full hour. And I said, oh my gosh, I have a full hour. I went through all the slides already. What am I going to ad lib and talk about for an hour? And I had to do something, and I kept on looking at my watch saying, please, Minahan, move. I wanted to take my watch and move it to 12 and say, 8 o'clock, we're just finished. But the talk seemed to be okay, but to me it was a total failure. But we're a smaller group today, and I'm getting tired of showing the same things over and over again. And in a slideshow with 500 to 600 people there, you don't have time to show plans and sections. So the lecture that I had set up doesn't have plans and sections, but we do have them. So I thought today, instead of just going through all the slides, which I usually set up in chronological order so you can see how the work developed from when I started in 1971 to where I am, right today. But I thought today instead, we can just kind of jump around to different things that might interest you, and if you would ask questions, I would be able to direct everything towards what you're interested in, because I'm getting kind of tired of saying the same thing over and over again. So please, interact with me and help me out by asking questions and so forth. To give you just a little bit of my background, I started out with an interest in architecture because I had to take a drafting class when I was 13 years old, and for the first time in my life, someone said I did something well, and they said, well, you should be an architect, and I had no idea at 13 how to even pronounce the word besides what it meant, but they said, oh, you design buildings and stuff. So I said, oh, well, that would be fun. So I started to design little houses that were awful, but build models of them, and So this is a fun hobby. This is a lot of fun. And, you know, I realized also at the time that being the best basketball player in my neighborhood wasn't going to be good enough to be an NBA basketball player. I wasn't going to make a living being a basketball player, so I said I better concentrate on something else. And this architecture thing, well, that's a lot of fun. You're just drawing things, building models of it. I said, you know, if I'm going to have to work for a living during my life, I might as well do something I really love and enjoy to do. So I got more and more interested in architecture. When I was 15 and starting high school, an architect opened an office a block and a half away from where I lived. So I walked in and knocked on the door, and I asked him if I can be his janitor and clean up after him so that I can just see what an architect does. And we talked a little bit, and he finally said okay. And I had previously walked by his office a few times, and I'd look in the window and I'd see a rendering of a building, and I said, oh, this must be a great architect. And at 15 I thought, you know, I was now going to go to work for the world's greatest architect, only architect I knew. And instead of putting me in the studio, and he didn't have anyone working for him at the time, and cleaning up after him, he put me at a desk, and for months all I did was letter A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, and practice my lettering until after a few months it got good enough that I can put it on a drawing. So when it was good enough, he started to you know, show me how to do drawings, and you know, I was actually, you know, working for him. And then he got busy, and he started to hire people that were in college, people that graduated college, young architects, as his practice started to grow. And there's this kid in the back room at a desk thinking that he works for the world's greatest architect. Well, all these other people that he hired, they knew that he wasn't the world's greatest architect. So they started to show me and introduce me to Frank Lloyd Wright, Corbusier, Oliver Alto, Mies, all the, you know, famous modern architects, and even to some architects that most people didn't know, Bruce Goff, who they showed me a magazine article on him that was published in Progressive Architecture in 1962, and they made it their passion to make me realize I wasn't working for the world's greatest architect. But I got a great education there, because when I graduated high school, and I only went to high school from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock, and from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock I worked for this architect, so I wasn't a fantastic academic student in school, but I got a great education on how a building went together and how to do a set of working drawings. And then I went off to college, and when I got into college, the very first year they give you design composition for a full year, where you're doing two-dimensional design composition, and then as you understand that, you start moving into three-dimensional composition. And they give us a book, and in the book, you know, we're learning about dominance, identity, and transition. We're learning about harmony, scale, and rhythm, and all the elements of basic design. No matter whether you're an architect, landscape architect, a sculptor, painter, composer, whatever, this was basic composition. So the architect would build a wall with maybe bricks. A landscape architect would build the same wall with plant material. A painter would do it with a color and a stroke. The composer would do it with musical notes, but we're all using the basic same composition. And I thought at 17 years old, you know, this is ridiculous. You can't teach design from a book. You know, it has to come from the heart. So for a year I rebelled in that class, you know, trying to deny the fact that someone can teach composition, that you have to either understand it or you don't. The second the class was over, the first thing I did was sell that book. Well, the next 4 years was all based on that first year, because all you did in the next 4 years in the design sequence was build up your confidence. You had to use the exact same principles of basic design on every project, but in second year you might be doing a small little building. In fourth year you might be doing a nuclear reactor. So it was, all they were doing was building up your confidence that no matter what you were given to design, you had the tools to tackle that design, because it was solving a series of problems through a beautiful way of doing it, through composition. And it wasn't until about 10, 15 years later, when I was in my own practice, that it finally dawned on me that the only important design class I ever had in my life was basic design composition in first year. So whatever I do, I still use what I learned when I was 17 years old, but as architects, we're artists. Not only are we an engineer and a construction person, we're also an artist, but our art is in architecture, so our job is to do things in a beautiful way. So you have a problem to solve, you solve it in a beautiful way. And I remember once being at a lecture, a very famous architect in the US, Robert Venturi, and he was showing a house he did, and he said it was a house, I believe it was for his mother, and he said he was having a problem because he needed to have a column, and the column was coming down right in front of the front door, you know, within a few feet of it, and he was trying to figure out how to solve that problem. Well, his solution was, he said, I finally decided by saying to myself, what would a builder do? And he said, a builder would just put a column there. So he said, that's what I did. And to me, immediately I said, no, that's not right. We're not just building buildings, we're building art. So you don't just put a column there, because nobody wants a column 3 feet from their front door. So your job is to solve things in a beautiful way. I have on here my website, and if you just kind of go through it, you can see a bunch of things. And we can go to the prepared slideshow that's just pictures, or we can jump around and talk about different buildings, why they were the way they were, you know, and then jump back, and instead of not showing you a plan and section of a building, we can jump around and show you those plans and sections, because you're a small group and we're close enough that you'll be able to see that stuff on the screen, because we can leave it on as long as we want, and you know, when we get tired we can just stop and we don't have to go through a formal show. But basically, when I design something, my goal is to design a structure that is at peace with its environment and that people are at peace within it. And if I do a building, and it doesn't matter if it's for a commercial client or for a residential client, although it's easier to talk about residential clients because everybody thinks they understand a house, but from an architect standpoint, it's really one of the toughest design problems to solve. It has a lot of functions that are involved in it, and it's a difficult problem. So when I look at architects' work, you know, one of the first things I jump to is their residential work, because that's where they have the opportunity to experiment and try things out. So I like looking at that. But when I design a structure, when I'm finished and the client takes the property over, I'm hoping that they'll be able to say that, gee, if I was an architect, this is what I would have done. And if they're able to say that, then I know I did a successful job on the project, because we don't want to design a building and then have a person adapt to that building. Our job is to design a building that is adapted to how someone else wants to use the building. And we have tremendous control of what we can do in buildings. But we can do things where we can bring light in to just spaces that a client wants light to come into. We can keep sunlight out of spaces that we don't want light to come into. And we can go to a degree where we can find, if we can be a situation where we might have a client and they'll say that this vase here was given to us by our children, and it was the first present, anniversary present, our children ever gave to us. It's the most important possession to us. It means everything to us. Well, you could take that vase for them, you can put it in an alcove, and you can put it in a position where on the day of their on their anniversary day, and let's say their anniversary day is December 17th, you can put it in a spot where on December 17th at 4 o'clock, and let's assume that that's the time that they did their wedding vows. If the sun is out on that particular day, hopefully it's out, it'll hit that vase. That's how much control we have in what we do. And although I start a design with an emotional thought, I bring it to a logical conclusion when I'm finished with it. So to me, I look at a building as a problem-solving art. So I'll go out to the property with a client and look at the property, and I'll try to understand what the poetry is of that site, because I want to capture the poetry of that site and bring it into the structure. So I'll say to the client, well, what do you like about this property so much? And there has to be some reason why they bought that land besides it was the right price in the right location. There could have been a number of properties that fit that description. But they might say, there's this tree and rock in the western end of the property, and we fell in love with that, and we thought the nicest thing in the world would be to wake up in the morning and see that rock and tree. Well, that's wonderful, and it tells you immediately that when they wake up in the morning, they should be somewhere sleeping on the west side of the property so that they can wake up and see that that tree and rock. But we all know that that's the hottest side of the property, and most people want it to be a little bit cooler when they wake up in the morning. So what are you going to do? Are you going to do some vertical sun control devices, or are you going to plant the deciduous trees so in the summertime the tree will block the sun from coming in? Or are you going to say, the heck with it, this house I'm air conditioning so I don't care about it? Well, I don't think anyone wants to take that approach to it. But before you solve that problem of how you're going to cut that western sun down, they might also say, I also love to wake up in the morning and have sunlight hitting me so that I can bounce out of bed early, stretch out and say, gee, it's great to be alive. Well, now you have a real problem. How are you going to give this client a western view and eastern light at the same time? Well, that's your job to solve that problem. Your job is not to tell the client, I can give you one or the other, you have to choose which one you want. Your job is to figure out how to solve that problem in a beautiful way. And it might be, if the people are facing to the west to get that view, you might have to have a wall somewhere where you can bring eastern light in that's going to bounce off that wall and then come back and hit them in their bed. But your job is to solve that problem in a beautiful way. As you go through the building, there'll be a number of those problems, and that's how the building takes its form and shape. Because for me, I start working from the inside and I work my way out so that the outside is just a reflection of the interior space. You can't change the exterior without affecting what's happening on the interior. And I'll only show the client, although when I'm working on a project, I'm doing my floor plan and my section simultaneously together, because I have a lot of projects where, you know, roof and wall are all one, and they come down, and you have to draw a section to see where they're hitting the ground. So the floor plan is always just a horizontal section, but I need to draw both of them simultaneously. But I only show the client the floor plan only initially, and when the floor plan functions just the way they want to live in that structure, that's when I'll start showing them, you know, how the volumes work, how sunlight comes in. And by the time you're finished doing that, they understand why you did things. Because if you try to explain to them, well, I did this because this is a beautiful way of doing this, that, you know, it was the right form, the right shape, and it's just beautiful, they're not going to understand that. But if you show them that, well, I put this wall here so that the sun would hit it, reflect off of it, and hit you in the eyes when you're in your bed, they understand something. They understand, oh, that's there because it solved the problem I asked them to solve for me. So by time you finish with the floor plan and the section, my experience has been that they have so much confidence and belief in their project, they don't even bother to ask you what the thing's going to look like. They just know that they're going to like it. And I've had that over and over again. And it's only in the past few years with the computer that people are asking me, what does this building look like? Because they think you can just press a button and it automatically goes into 3D. And we know it takes a lot of work to do a 3D drawing. I don't even know how to open the computer program I work in. I don't even know how to open it in 3D. So if someone asks for what their house is going to look like, I have to hire someone to draw it up for me, because I just work plan and section alone. So, you know, maybe it's a good time to start going through some projects. So if there's one that you want to see, you know, we can jump to it, or I can just arbitrarily choose one on the website here, and we can go through it a little bit. Well, this project was a apartment project, and I was about 24 years old when I started working on it. And at the time, I was working for a civil engineering firm. I couldn't get myself hired by an architect in Portland. I seemed to, something was wrong, because I'd go into an office and a month or two later I'm fired. You know, I was missing something, but I couldn't figure out what it was. So I decided, well, I'll go work for a civil engineer, then I don't have to deal with the aggravation of being fired constantly. And at the time, the civil engineers did the land planning, and they basically did the land planning for free, because the money was in construction engineering and in surveying. So land planning they just did almost for free, just so that they can get the big money and the survey work. But they were doing a survey for a client, and they decided to say, you know, we have an architect working for us, you know, maybe you'd like us to do the architecture also, because it'd be so easy. We're doing the survey and we can just hand it over to our architect and he'll design something for you. Well, the client thought, well, maybe that's not a bad idea. He'll give that a try. So we got this 17-unit apartment project to do. And why don't you, as I'm talking, just go through them and then go to the scans and find the floor plans and sections for it, if you remember what they are. But it was on a sloping site going up, and so each unit had to step up, which you'll see in the sections. But what happened for me, and you need to have in life, in any field that you go into, you need to have a little bit of luck when you're getting started. But you have to also realize when that lucky moment comes and grab it. So for me, I'm working on this project for these civil engineers, and they then all of a sudden realize they don't want to get into architecture, that the insurance liability insurance is different, and they don't want to get into that. So they said, would you quit the firm and take this job with you and get it out of our hair? So I said, sure, and that's how I started my practice in 1971 with this 17-unit apartment project. Why don't you see if you can find the plans and section for it. I want to see if I can. Well, that was just a perspective drawing of it in the original design. It had all these trees all over the site, so I wanted to save every tree that I could save. So sometimes the trees would come right up through the building, and I worked the design around it. Let's see if you can find the section. That's the site plan. So on this, you have this hillside, and you have your parking right over here, and then you walk through these doors. So if you remember from the pictures you saw previously, you saw this hillside and you saw this building stepping up this hillside. Well, you park in here, and then you go through this door, and there's a public walkway, and there's always almost a 18-inch step up on each walkway you go, so that each unit steps up 3 feet from the next one, and then from this public walkway you can go into a central courtyard, and then from the central courtyard you had a lower unit that you'd enter here and a staircase that went to the upper unit, and then you would have your living space here with kitchen, dining, and living space, and this was an entry hall, and your bedroom suites were on this end of the project, so that there was a complete separation between this noise of the living area and the quietness of the sleeping area. This is a typical plan where you enter and you had the family living space, the entry hall, and the staircase that went up to the 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. And this was a different unit there was only 3 of these units that went over the center of the project, and you would enter down below where there would be a staircase. There was a bedroom down below and a bathroom. Then you'd come up the staircase, you have your living, dining, kitchen. You had an atrium space and another bedroom and another bedroom. Let's go to the, here you can see the section, how you step up the hillside. You have a unit and a unit, then you have the next unit. There's always a 3-foot step up as you're going up this hill. Oh, okay, I can sit down. Which button do I push? Oh, this. Oh, okay. That'll make it much easier. Okay, so you'd step up, and then you would come into a courtyard. So, here's where you park your car. You come through a doorway here, and then you have this public walkway that goes up. or you can step up and come into the central courtyard. And from this, when you open this door, you can come into the kitchen, dining, living room, and an alcove. Or you'd walk this way and there would be a staircase that went up to these units right over here. So the key to multifamily work is to have sound separation, privacy between units. So another thing that I did was the balconies, they were always staggered so that you never had a balcony side by side. They were, if one balcony was here, the next balcony would be diagonally down, so that if you went back to one of the pictures, you'll see that much better. Just go kind of there. This one here, you can see here's a balcony, and then the unit below, instead of having the balcony right over here, the balcony's here, and then instead of having a balcony here and the next unit a balcony right here together, there was this separation and the balcony was here, because I kept on flip-flopping the plans so that I would have this separation and privacy throughout. So this project was very successful. Usually at the time in Portland, when you're doing multifamily housing, you do fourplexes and you have a bunch of fourplex buildings, but this was all one building. It was completely different from what everybody was doing. There was a big waiting list to get into it, and I thought, aha, I'm going to be the king of multifamily building in Portland, Oregon. And what happened was success killed me. I never got another multifamily job in my life. And what happened with this, and one of the reasons that happened, was that the building was so different from every other apartment complex that they had a waiting list to get into it. And when they had the waiting list and the building was still under construction, they decided to start raising the rent. So instead of having, at the time in 1971, the rent was supposed to be $280 a month, they were renting these at $425 a month. Every other developer in town thought the rent was so high because the building had so much cost overruns that they were forced to rent it that high. But in reality, the building cost the exact same amount of money that all the other apartment houses being built in the city at the time was being built at, but nobody would believe me, so I never got another multifamily house again. So if you don't have a question, do you want to just go through the progression?
What are those triangular things on the roof?
Huh?
What are those triangular things on the roof?
Oh, this right. Those were blue lights, so that when you, at nighttime, when you went up, it lit up the driveway slightly, but it lit it up more like a beautiful necklace on a woman's neck. So it was, I tried to give it a sense of jewelry to it. But all the things that you have, the horizontal siding, and this was all of this was based on rhythm, basic composition that I did in the first year of college. So the triangles related to this, everything was a harmonious composition put together. So would you like to just go through projection from the 70s to today, or would you like to jump around? Because I don't know how much time you have, and the later work is really what I'm interested in.
Can you see the Penny Raymond?
Pardon me?
The Penny Raymond house?
Oh, Penn at Raymond House? Why did you choose that house?
Actually, I went through your website before and I found it quite interesting. I thought.
Okay, well, you'll have to tell me why you found that one so interesting, because it's just a little house. But we can go that, since you're asking that, we'll go to that. Unfortunately, you don't have the drawings to that particular house, but we can just go to. It's not one that I had in the slideshow, but if you just go to the website, you'll be able to, we can go through it. So, yeah, one more up. Yeah, there we go. This is a little beach house retreat, and it's right on the sand. It's built right on the sand, and what you have to do is you have strong winds at the beach, so you want to have a lot of glass in the front here because that's where the view is. But to break up the wind, this is on a slight curvature, and then the glass comes up on an angle so that the wind tends to move to each side. And I go through the slides a little bit. Let's go through more and we'll come back. One more. So on the front side, I have this courtyard inside here, so the house is protecting you from the wind, but you can sit here and you can look through the glass panels here straight through and get the view and be protected from the wind. So that's how some of those forms developed. This house was had to go through a design review board, so the first design I did was totally rejected by the review board. It was too outlandish for them. I had curved forms, and I had sand going over the roofs, and they just couldn't understand it. So I had to do a house that was a little bit more conventional. It had an open kitchen, open living, dining area. There was a fireplace down here. These panels slid open so you can get to the TV and the stereo equipment. Let's go up and they can see a few more. Okay, so let's go. This is the entry where the courtyard was a little bit at this higher level from the living room, so that you can look straight out and you'd get a better view. If it was on the same level as the living room, you're looking straight out and the floor would be blocking things. But when you're up higher, you have an angle that goes down that helps the view. But you can see the open kitchen, and then it opens into the open living room, and you can see how the glass is going on this curvature, and then it's falling out on an angle like this. So we can go up to the next. And that's just, another view of the living room, and you can see what spectacular view you get out of the house. And then this one was just looking back from the beach side, looking into the house. But it's just a very small house. I know, to see a few more photographs. Did you ever download a file of mine from my computer that said project photos? If you have that, we can look at a few more. Oh yeah. Go. Yeah, this will give you a few more shots of the house. This was one of the guest bathrooms. That was a guest bedroom. Another view of the guest bedroom. Some of these views now are repeat, but just go through it so that they can get the full idea of everything. Then it had a little master bedroom with a bed, a window seat, the window out to look at the ocean. And one thing that I like to do on all my projects is that when I'm designing, I'm thinking of how furniture arrangements are, and I'm doing the interior design at the very beginning, that I'm doing the overall concept plan. I might not know exactly what tile I might be putting on the floor, but I know that I'm going to use a hard surface here, or I'm going to have carpeting here, but in this other room I'm going to have a concrete floor. But the materials I use inside, I carry to the outside. So the shingles here continue outside. This pattern that I did on the outside to give privacy from the house next door, which, if you remember, was very close to this house. There was very little separation between houses. So I created this trellis here because if I did a full wall, it was going to be too heavy. And then also the winds, it'd be very difficult structurally to make that wall sound that can resist the wind. So if I kept a lower wall and then had a trellis that the wind could blow through, I would be able to achieve that. But what happened outside, those lines and everything continue on the inside. So I try to minimize the separation between inside and out on a project. And I think we went through all those, but you have some particular questions on that project that you want?
I mean, I feel like it's like just so humbly sitting by the beach, kind of like the glass house also.
Yeah. It sits very quietly, on the sand is what I was trying to do. The sand in front here changes in the wintertime because of the storms that come in, and sometimes it creates a barrier that's coming up, and you have to stand up to get the view. But in the springtime, for this full subdivision, they come in with a backhoe and they push all the sand away and bring it back out. But this house didn't have the problems with the sand going high like that. It always stayed real, low down here because of the curvature and the slope of the glass, and it just moved the wind away. So they didn't have the sand problems that the other houses had.
I'm not an expert, so what kind of structural geological problems would building on a beach pose?
So Robert, that's Naomi. She's not an architect, and she's asking what kind of issues did you face while designing on the beach?
Well,
structural issues, geological issues. Were there any?
The problems weren't as much for me as it was for the contractor, building on the beach, because for me, I have the basic land, and and the beach sand can take any of the loads I need to work with. In fact, this house even has a basement in it, and it's just all sand. You dig it out, you build, and you do your construction work just like you would do on any building that's on land. That you don't have on this project. You don't have special geological problems, but you have tremendous construction problems, because when you're trying to dig your foundations that you need to support the house, because you have to float the house on a concrete slab on the sand. Just when you're trying to dig out the perimeter, the sand keeps on falling in constantly, and then you have a windstorm coming by. They can't work, and everything they did is back to just flat sand. So the problems in construction was for the contractor, and you couldn't build a wall around the thing, say I'm blocking out the sand, because when the windstorm comes, the sand is like talcum powder. It just goes up in the air and it comes down everywhere. So, for the architect and engineer, it wasn't a problem, but for the contractor, it was a big headache, because some days they couldn't work because the winds were blowing too strong.
Do you want to see another house?
Yeah. And before you can choose another house you want to see, but I started out doing nothing but commercial work, and usually you start out and you do a little remodel, then you do an addition, and then maybe you get a little house to do and a bigger house, and then you get into commercial work. I worked backwards. I started with commercial work and I worked my way down to residential, but I always joke I did it successfully. And I enjoy the residential work because it gives you a chance to experiment, try things out. I try to make every building different. This building was designed, it was a high-rise office condominium building that was designed in 1978. And when you talk about sustainability and energy efficiency and doing a LEED building, or I don't know what they call your buildings here that meet all of the energy requirements and special things. This building in 1978, unfortunately it wasn't built because the developer died and the project didn't go ahead, but it had all of the things that we talk about in terms of sustainability and the good architectural practices today. And I don't advertise that stuff or talk about that because to me, sustainability is as old as can be, because you go through India and you can go through every region, every tribal community, they all built sustainable buildings. It's just in the 20th century when we got into technology, we forgot all about it. And now we're coming back to it and we're making a big sales pitch about sustainability. But to me, sustainability is just good design, so it should be there always. On this building, go down the upper two photographs. I designed it so that this was the north side, and north side you don't need sun-controlled devices. High-rise building, doesn't matter what climate you're in, if you're in a hot climate or you're in a very cold climate. The problem is, how do you keep this building cool? Because there's so much electronic equipment inside the building that's generating heat, and there's so many people inside the building that generate heat that you're always trying to figure out how to cool it some way. So in this, I didn't have to do anything on the north side because you don't have the sun on that side. But when you get to the southeast or the northwest, I switched to vertical sun control devices because that's the low sun and you have to use vertical elements. But as you got around to the south side, here's another view of either the southeast or the northeast. You get around to the south side and you need to have horizontal overhangs to block the sun out. So the structure, the forms and shapes of the structure was a reflection of how it related to the sun. And then, it had all other types of sustainable things in it. The only thing I missed in 1979 was rainwater retention, because where I come from, it rains 9 months out of the year, and a shortage of water is never a problem for us. So it never dawned on me that that would be something that I should be doing, but now it's something that we do because we have rivers everywhere, and we have fisheries in the river, we have salmon runs, and we always now clean our water before we would release it back into the river. So if I'm doing a residential project, I have to have a stormwater reservoir, which I take all the water off of the roof or hard surfaces on the property and bring it into this reservoir, which has planted material and sand filters, and the water slowly seeps through this, and then we let it out through another pipe to a drainage way. But by the time it gets into this pipe, the water's been cleaned so that it can go into the drainage way and then down to the rivers, so that we're not affecting our salmon runs. I have, floor plans of this one, but I'd rather spend the time with floor plans on the houses. Let's go up I'll choose one. Let's go up to the top and let's see, what do we want to choose? Let's go through the Miyasaka project. This is a project in Japan, and the first building was this building here, which is a very large house that is about 7,500 square feet, so that's somewhere about 700 to 800 square meters. And then on this side, 20 years later, we added an entertainment pavilion for the client to entertain his business guests, and I'll go through both buildings. But for this particular client, he loved American materials, so all the materials come from the United States except for the concrete, but the stone, the wood, the glass, the glulam beams, everything came from the United States. And I wanted to design a structure that was, the second floor would feel like it's floating, so there's a band of glass that runs around, and at nighttime when the lights are on, the upper floor feels like it's just floating in space. But this house was designed to take into consideration the tremendous earthquakes that Japan has. So the first floor is a concrete structure, and it goes up to, it goes up to the 2-meter level. And then there's a horizontal steel strut that's hidden inside here that runs around, that ties all of the concrete together. The house is designed in a crescent shape, which would be a stronger shape than just a straight wall shape, so that it'd be more resistant to earthquakes. And then the glulam beams for the second floor were in a lollipop shape. And if we kind of go around to show some more things, you can see there, oops, stay right there for a second. You can see this, it goes in this shape here, and now let's continue on going. And when it gets upstairs, wait a second, that lollipop shape continues up and it comes around, so that you don't have a floor and a vertical wall, you have a continuous wall and floor that become one element, which is a stronger shape. And the forms of this house were developed to resist an earthquake. But also it was using materials that the client wanted. So this was a house that was built on a fast track method, that we were doing the drawings at the same time that they were building the house. But you don't do any site drawings, you don't do any site measurements. The manufacturer in the United States is building doors, he's building the doors, he's building the cabinets, he's building the windows, the glulam beams are being built, and the glulam beams come together, there's knife plates and bolts that tie it together, you have these wood trim. All of this is being built in the United States at the time that they're doing the concrete work. So I would tell them that, well, we have these columns and we have these curved glulam beams coming down on them. It's going to be very difficult to be able to get the bolt holes in the right location. And in the United States, we drill those on the job site. And Japanese said to me, our concrete work and placement of our steel connectors are right to the millimeter. So you just make sure that everything you send us is right to the millimeters, and pre-drill those holes for us and make sure they're in the right place. And that's how, how my projects in Japan go. And they were correct. They built right to the millimeter, and they were fantastic people to work with, because they would not ask you to change something or say, well, it's better to do something this way, because to them, they would feel that they're insulting you. So they did exactly what your drawings called for. This was the first project that I ever did in as CAD drawings, and I decided to do it as CAD drawings because through email we can ship the drawings back and forth quickly, and then also I can go between the metric system that I'm doing my drawings for their purposes, and then I convert them to imperial for the American manufacturers that are not working in millimeters. So I was able to move back and forth quickly between the two. Can you find the drawings for that? And it won't be in the scanned drawings. It'll be in a file that I sent you of that would be the Miyasaka file. Yeah. Okay. So, this here is the basic floor plan of the house, where you come in and you come around and you have a covered drop-off point where you can drop people off, and then you come in, through this into this courtyard here. You come into an entryway and you do the traditional thing of taking your shoes off, and then you step up 100 millimeters into the house, and then there was a gallery that ran along here so that they can display artwork. And you went this way, there was a powder room. This was a shoe closet so that they can store all their shoes in. And then he had a guest entertainment room, and then you have your your dining room, conversation pit. All this is living room. Let's stay with that one for a moment. With this one here, then you had your kitchen here, where you can then serve people in this entertainment area, or you can have a kitchen table here and dining room here. And then this was the laundry room and storage room and a service entry. And then on this side here, you had a study for his 85-year-old mother at the time, a study for his father at the time, and then this was the tatami mat room, or the Japanese room, with a Buddhist altar. So this had to face east. They had also a Shinto shrine here that had to face south, and they were both religions, and they didn't see any conflict in this. They had their native religion is Shintoism, which is a belief in nature, and then they looked at Buddhism as being the enlightenment of the mind, so they didn't feel any conflict between the enlightenment of the mind and the respect for nature. And then he had a separate master bedroom suite for his parents, where the father slept here, the mother slept here. They had their two closets, and then they had a bathroom, and they had their shower bathing room, which had a sauna. It had a stand-up shower here, a sit-down shower here. It had a hot tub here to soak in, and a cold tub. So it had the things that are in that the Japanese like to have. But that's the roof plan. Let's go to the second floor plan. If you can go to the second floor. This is just the roof plan. Let's go to, here's the second floor, where you went up a staircase and you had this, walkway here where you can look down onto the living room, and then he had his master bedroom here, and then he had his closet, then he had his bathroom area where he had a shower that was a combination stand-up, sit-down shower and a soaking tub. Then there was a guest bedroom over here with a Western-style bathroom, and then a sitting room here. From his side, he can go out to a balcony this way, or you can go out to this long balcony, because on this side you could see the fireworks that were shot off twice a year by the city, so they had a balcony out here. Let's go to the sections. You can see sections through the house. this is right where the car drop-off area is, and you walk into this courtyard and you go through this entry doorway here, and kind of try to remember this form that you see right over here. You're going to see it repeated over and over again in the house, and what I like to do is I like to work with a small vocabulary of materials, but play with them one off of another, and then also use reoccurring forms. So you have the circles here, you have the circles here, you have the curved glulam beams here that come up to the straight glulam beam, and then the structural support right over here, and then the wall comes back down. So I like to just tie everything together to make a house one composition, one element moving into the next element. This is another section, so you can see his master bedroom suite, and you can see the glulam beam, and it works its way all the way up and becomes the wall. And then this was the guest entertainment. No, excuse me. This is the entryway where you take off your shoes in the closet to store the shoes in, and then the step up of 100 millimeters to, get into the main portion of the house where you have the gallery way. And then this right over here was the dining room space. So the main living room was a 2-story space, but the dining room where you sat was a 1-story space. And this is that a little bit more than 2 meters horizontal strut that tied together all the concrete columns. So you can see in this concrete column how it's curved, and there's a knife plate set in there so that this beam is set down into it, and then the bolts are all done. So it's quite a job to get this curvature exactly right to match the curvature of the glulam beam that's being built someplace else at the same time, and then be able to drop it in place and have all the bolt holes line up. But we were right to the millimeter on our side of the project, and they were right to the millimeter on their side of the project. So this is just a few more sections, showing that throughout the full house, the vocabulary of forms were all the same, and they were all based on trying to get this shape that would resist an earthquake. And then this was the overall site plan. In the future, we added right in this area, which we'll see next, we added the guest entertainment pavilion. But let's now, in this grouping here, if you just click on that, you'll go back and we'll get a whole bunch of, we can go through all these photographs quickly. This is right at the street, and there's a gate here that slides open and close, and you start seeing right away that circular form, and then you'll see it again. It'll just repeat itself throughout the structure. But this is the driveway. Here's a horizontal. I'll go back to the, you see the concrete, and it has all these horizontal lines in it, and I'll tell you something about that after we go through this. So we can just go through this. If there's a slide you want me to talk about, just stop and we can talk about it. Now you can see it at night where everything seems to, float at nighttime. That's the the last one here, that's the master bedroom suite area for the parents. And now this is the entry courtyard. Now we're going to go into the house. You can see those circular forms again that was on the outside. You take your shoes off and you step up into this area here. And then you can see those circular forms again. The glass here was sandblasted, and it had the family crest in it. Now when you, right over here was the entry, the door to the shoe closet, and this is the gallery way where all the artwork is displayed. All the materials again came from the U.S., and that's just the way the client wanted to have it. The skylights were made, so it's quite amazing that everything went together when they're building in Japan and we're building in the United States, and we're all just building off of the same metric drawings. And even the furniture was made in the U.S. Yeah, so you see those circular forms going again, which support the glulam beams. Now we're upstairs, and you see how it turns into circles. You can't make a circular glulam beam, so all these beams are actually semicircles, and then there's a joint that puts that you tie them together.
How did you do the heating in the house, Robert?
How did I do what?
The heating. The heating.
Oh, the heating. Oh, okay. We used radiant floor heating downstairs because it's all a concrete slab that we're building upon. And then upstairs, they except for the bathrooms, they didn't want to use radiant floor heating, so we had wall radiators that we used instead upstairs. And the house always had cross ventilation in it, so we didn't need to, although it gets warm and humid in the summertime, we didn't need air conditioning because we had cross ventilation going through the full house. But before I go on, I wanted to tell you one thing about Japan and my experience. But as I'm talking, Stefan, if you can go to the guest entertainment pavilion, then we'll be ready to talk about that. I went to Japan, the first time I went to Japan was in 1979, and I went just as a tourist, and going there as a tourist, you go to Kyoto because that's where you see the beautiful gardens, that's where you see the temples, the castles, and all the things that make Japanese culture of what we think of Japanese culture. But I went there and I didn't think, that this was all very nice. And it was very beautiful, but it had absolutely nothing to do with what I do in my practice and the type of architecture that I do. So I didn't try to analyze anything. I just looked at it as a tourist and thought, oh, it's all very, very nice. And said, I'll never use this in my lifetime. And then 20 years later, I get a commission, or actually 15 years later, I get a commission in Japan. And although the client wanted a Western design, it still had to have Japanese elements to it, and I wanted it to relate to Japan and not be a house that just belonged in the United States. So I was conscious about the wood detailing I was doing, and I wanted to have, you couldn't imitate what they did 700 years ago in Japan because it's just too expensive, and also it's not of our time, it's of another time, and we're living in the 20th and 21st century. We're not living in the 14th century, so we shouldn't be on drugs and pretending to live in a time period that we're not in. We should live in the present. But after the house was completed, I went back to Kyoto on a visit because I wanted to show a friend Kyoto, and I was shocked on the second visit because I started to see the spirit that I had in my wood detailing on the house. I saw it in these Japanese temples. And when I said, remember that concrete and the horizontal lines, I saw all these walls in Kyoto that always had these horizontal lines and in a similar proportion. And it made me realize that everything you see goes into your subconscious, and everything you learn is filtered into your subconscious, and it comes out when you need it. It just automatically comes out when it's needed. So without me realizing it, the experience I had in 1979 in seeing Kyoto came out 15 years later when I started to work on this project without, realizing it. And when we design buildings, we're lucky to be architects because the mathematician and the scientists, they usually do their very best work when they're in their 20s and 30s, and the rest of their lives they're reiterating and expanding upon what the theories and ideas they had in their 20s. But an architect gets better with experience because every job he does, he learns something and he builds upon that to the next one and moves on and on. So as you get older, your buildings get better and better. You get better control. You start to understand every line you draw, what it represents and what it means. It's not just a line on paper anymore. It's representing the material. It's representing the height. It's representing what puts the building together. So, we're lucky that as we get older, every building's going to get better because we have more experiences to draw on that will come out subconsciously. And there was one other thing I thought that came to mind that I want to remember now. I forgot it, so let's go on to...
Your residence, Elcro?
Pardon me?
Go to your residence, Elcro?
Oh, yeah, I'll get to that, but I wanted to finish up with the pavilion that was built 20 years later. Let's go to the plans first, and then we'll go to the pictures. So probably the plans are probably up in there someplace. Yeah. Yeah. So here's the existing house, and this is the addition, which is a entertainment pavilion where you have a dining room area. You have a dining room, a fireplace, and a lounge area. This here is a carport because this house never had a parking area, so we finally built the carport for it. And then you walk around here and you come to these doors and you come into this pavilion here with the dining room. There's a commercial kitchen here, but it's made to look like a residential kitchen. And then there's a connection from the service side of the main house to go into the kitchen area. And the way this building is used is that the client would invite his business guests over, and then he would hire a chef to close his kitchen for the night and come and cook a dinner for his guests. And sometimes he would hire a chef from the city that this building's in. Sometimes a chef would come from a city that's 3 hours away. Tosh, the client, loves food, and we have great dinners in this space right over here. So there should be a section through the building, and see if you can find that.
No, I don't have.
Okay. Well, then let's get out of this drawing. Maybe it's in this drawing down here.
It's still a site plan.
Oh, that's still a site plan? Okay, well, you'll see the sections. We'll go through these. And so this is the main house, and here starts the new house. And these same forms for the columns that were on here running through, continue through. I'm using the same materials in this house, and I'm using the same details so that there's a continuity between the two buildings, and they seem to belong within this environment. So you can see this, fountain here. The walls of the existing house just goes right into it. So we'll just kind of move through these photographs. And from the main house car drop-off point, you can look back and see the carport, and you see these circular forms just continuing all the way through. Then you're going to come around this way, and you're going to enter through this semicircular area. And when you walk through that semicircular area, you come to go to the next one. You come to this courtyard area where you're now going to go and enter into the building at this point. See, in the slide lecture, I would just show one or two photographs, but this one here has everything, so you're going to see a lot of repetition, but we can go through them fast. But you have the dining area here, and there was 4 dining tables that were all 1,500 millimeters square, and you can remove the legs. So depending on whether he wanted to serve a dinner for 20 people, he'd put all 4 tables out, or if he wanted to serve a dinner like this for 8 people, you put just 2 tables out. And then over here on the side was the kitchen area. And then you can see back, the fireplace separates the lounge area from the dining area. The Japanese built this building in 3 months. Did anybody have any questions on that last building before we go to this one here? Okay, well, we'll go to this. If you have a question, don't just talk. Don't raise your hand because I won't see you. Just interrupt me. I'd love to be interrupted so I don't have to talk. This is my own house, and it's on a hillside, and down here is where my office space is. And what I wanted to do emotionally, I wanted to have a structure that seemed to be tied to the ground but soared out into space. And let's go to the next photograph. This one here, let's stop here for a moment. You can see that the house is designed kind of in a funnel shape. And the reason for that is that the higher up you got on the hillside, the better your view was of Mount Hood, which is the major mountain in Oregon, and the Willamette River, which is the main river of Portland. So I wanted the family to be able to appreciate that view. So I built the house where you had the kitchen up on the top, you had the dining living room on the top, so the family spaces were on top where the best view were. The house is actually a 3-story house, but every story is a split level, so it has 6 different levels. But the most square footage was taken up by the family area on the top. Then when you went down to the bedroom areas, you needed less space, so it got smaller. And then when you got down to my studio, you needed even less space, so it got even smaller. People have asked me, well, why are these walls projecting out? And back behind here, there's a very noisy road. And these walls act as baffles to block the sound from coming around and coming onto the balcony here. Also, because on this side you have the river down below, there's strong winds that come down through the river, and they would hit this wall, so that they just wouldn't hit the house itself square on. When they hit this, they're hitting a curved surface, but I was trying to break up the wind when it hit the house so that I wouldn't have the full force of the wind. This is going down, walking around, and you go down to a terrace here that will lead into where my office is. And then this was the driveway that was coming up, and the cars parked right here in the carport. You walk around here and you go down to my office space. This is the carport, and that's the main entry to the house. This here is, you come up from an entryway, you go up a half a flight of steps, and you come into the main living room space. And the living room, dining room one. And here you see that you have walls that, start from the inside and they continue out, and those were the walls that were acting as a baffle. And you see the windows here. This is all part of one composition, because I don't believe that you take a wall and you say, oh, I want a window here, so you just cut a rectangle out. Everything should be a total composition. Now, this you can see, the total composition, and everything, works together. The forms all relate to one another. Now, my climate is totally different than your climate, so what you're seeing here wouldn't work where you live, and what you do here wouldn't work for where I live, because our problem is that our climate is overcast and dark for 9 months out of the year. So our job is to get sunlight into the structure. You're usually trying to just filter sunlight and not have a full force of sunlight. So for us, it's important on this south wall here that in the wintertime, the sunlight comes all the way through, but then we have enough of an overhang so that in the summertime, it blocks the sun from coming in. So we just have different conditions that we have to work with. And then this was a kind of a sitting area above the living room, a half a flight above. And then you had these sliding doors that closed off the master bedroom. Usually they're wide open, and you can look all the way through the living room, out the windows, and see Mount Hood, so you can see the sunrise rising behind Mount Hood. And this is just the sitting room alcove with a day bed, so you can watch TV. And when this was built, we had the old TV, so you had to have big cabinets for it. And then the kitchen, which was semicircular, and it went around with a window seat right over here. I don't know if we have it, but this is a section through the house where you have the carport here, you have my office down here, kids' bedrooms here, living room, master bedroom suite up here with the sitting room, bedroom area, wardrobe closet, master bath. And now this house cantilevered out, and the cantilever only went back to this point here, so it didn't go back the standard distance that you think a cantilever is supposed to go back. That standard formula, if you cantilever X out, you go 2X back. This went less, but what I did was I put a really big concrete slab here that was almost about 900 millimeters thick, and it was about 1.5 meters wide and about 4 meters long. And it acted, the beam came back, and then there was columns that brought it down to this big slab, and that slab acted as a counterweight, keeping the house from tipping over. And usually in my design process, I don't bother with exterior elevations. For me, everything is in the plan and in the section. But when the house was under construction, friends kept on asking me, well, what does this house look like? So I finally did a pencil drawing with inking in just the window areas to just let friends know what the house actually looks like. And this is one of the last pencil drawings. Not the last, but it's getting towards the end of my career in drawing by hand. So we didn't go through the plans, and there was, if you go back again, there's the different plans that we can go through. So this is the carport level, and you come in and you have your entryway, and you can go up or you can go down. In this case, you're going down, and you have the two children's bedrooms with a bathroom in between them. But if you continued downstairs more, you would get to a family room, which is shown just right here in this spot over here. But from the entryway, if you went upstairs, you would come up through here and you come into the living room space, and then you have your kitchen, dining room, balcony, another balcony. You'd go up and you would have the sitting room, the master bedroom, wardrobe closet, master bathroom. And then if you went outside and came down around here, walking around, and you went down this courtyard, you got into the studio space of my house. These are just, Stefan always wants to show off the hand drawings, and the hand drawings I'm not interested in. I'm interested in the building, and I don't really care about seeing all these preliminary drawings and designs that you see, like if you go on, start surfing the internet, there's this site called Pinterest or something like that, and they're always showing you renderings of different buildings and stuff. You can make an ugly building look great in a rendering, and I can make a lousy building look good in a hand drawing, but the real picture is the actual building that's built. So you see all these high rises all the time in rendering form as an idea, and they all look fantastic because they all look transparent and you can see through them, and you see a lot of interest in them. But in reality, when these buildings are built, they're just big vertical slabs and you don't see through them. They're solid forms that are just going up. So I don't really care about preliminary drawings. I'm really interested in the building itself and what happened with the building. So that's what I go for. So unless you want to see just drawings, we can go to another building and go through it. So you can tell me what you'd like to do.
I think we'll look at one more building and then we'll take some questions.
Okay. Let's go back to the website, and you can choose a building if you want, or I'll just pick one out. Well, actually, I have like this one and these three that I love. So which one you want to see?
The middle one.
Oh, Wilkinson? Okay. You know, let's just first really fast go through all the pictures so you get an idea, and then we'll go into the plans and sections and talk about it. Well, we'll go back after we see the plans, just to give you a real fast introduction, because there's a lot of things that can be talked about on this building. This is in Portland, and it's on a hillside in Portland, and it's 10 minutes from downtown Portland. So this is the type of environment that when I get a project in my hometown, which is not very often, what I get to work with. So the sites have this beautiful poetry to it, and they're very soft, sensuous sites. So you want to use very soft, delicate lines, because what I want to do is I want a building to grab the site, be part of the site, and I want the roof to grab the airspace. Now on this building, couldn't get a contractor to give us a fair price, and this happens on a lot of the buildings. So when that happens, I'll act as the builder, and the reason why I do that is I want to get the building built, and to get it built, I know I have to get it within a budget. So what I'll do is I'll hire people and just run the job myself. On this particular house, I hired 2 young carpenters who were 24 years old. They never built a house in their life. I wouldn't say they were carpenters, they were woodworkers really. But I sensed that they were fantastic craftsmen, so I decided that I'll have them build this house. But the trouble was, since they never built a house and they never had to look at plans, there was a communication problem. And I had, at the time, a young intern that came to my office, and this was at the time that I was making a transition between computer drawing and hand drawing, and this young man didn't know how to hand draft. His hand drafting was so bad that I would be embarrassed to show it to someone and have him do a drawing and send it out to somebody. And he didn't know my CAD program. So I decided to put him on the job with the 2 young carpenters, because I figured that when they call up on the phone with a question, if he said that, if he was talking about a beam, I would know it was a beam. With the other 2 kids, you didn't know, when they would say beam, you didn't know if they meant a column or a beam or what. Well, with the one architectural intern, he would at least know a beam and a column, and he might not know what a shear wall was, but he would realize that, oh, I better ask, what this is. So that's how we communicated, plus I would come out to the job every day. But it was a wonderful experience, and if you ever have a chance to work on a construction site, it's a great experience. And tell young interns are just starting out, get onto a construction site and work a little bit, because then you start to understand that when you draw a wall, you have to tell someone else who's going to build that wall where that wall begins, where the wall stops, how tall the wall is, does it change in its height, is there any openings in the wall. You have to explain all that information to them. And being on the job for a year, he learned all those things, and when he came back in the office, he was able to do a set of working drawings. But he also did the shingling on the house, and he never did shingling in his life. And I would explain to him that when the shingles were going to come up against a curb form, you had to curve your shingles. When it was running along a straight wall, you ran your shingles straight. And I said, you want to vary the exposure of your shingles, that I don't ever want to shingle more than 150 meter exposure, but sometimes I want it as little as 25 or 50 millimeter exposure, and you had to do this in a random pattern that's related to the curvatures that you're trying to create. So at night he would go into the office and he would try to lay out shingle layout, and I'd come into the studio and I'd say, you can't do it that way. This is something that you have to feel when you're out on the job site. And you can do it. And all I had to do with this young man is make him feel that he can do it, build up his confidence. And once he was confident, he did this fantastic shingle job without ever shingling before in his life. But let's go to the plans and section, and then we can go back to the outside pictures so that you understand the building. Let's go to the site plan first. So this is what we call a flag lot. The street's here, and the buildable property is back here, so you have this long driveway that you have to go down to get to the house. So there's the public street here, there's another house here, there's another house right over here, and then we have our house, right over here. This is the contours of the ground, so you can see everything is sloping down. Let's go now to the first floor plan, main floor plan. Okay. So when you come down this driveway, you have this garage, and when you go back to the photographs, you'll miss this garage because the garage door looks just like a shingle wall, but you had your garage door, your garage here, and the owner can park his car in here and he can come in this way. But the guests would come in this way, and then they would come into this courtyard, and then they would enter the house at this point here. And from here you would have your fireplace, living room, you'd have your kitchen, a meditation room, a large balcony, and on this side here you had a powder room, guest closet, his study, and then this was his service entry, and then this was a light well to bring light down to the downstairs. Now the requirements in this house was the owner, he had a girlfriend who was a gourmet cook, and she would, on Saturday evenings, they would have a dinner would take 6 hours because she would make one course in the kitchen. He'd sit in his room here and he would think about what wine to serve with the course, and then they'll eat that first course. She'd come back to the kitchen, start preparing the second course. He would go back into his meditation room and think about what wine to serve in there. So that was one of the things that the house had to function for. He was a music lover, so when you get to the sections, you'll see that the forms of the house are set to give him the best acoustics possible. Also, he loved to make ice cream, so he had a large balcony for ice cream. But before we get into these, we'll get back to these. Let's go back to the floor plan and go to the lower floor plan. The very top one up here, the lower floor plan, will go to that. So when you came down the staircase, he had his master bedroom and his master bath. Then he had his wine cellar, which was underground, and it had 2,500 bottles of wine in it. Then he had a guest bedroom, wardrobe closet, a bathroom, and a tub and a shower, and another guest closet. And this was just a hallway, and that light well from up above was right in this level over here. So now I want to take you through some sections through the house. And this house, there was never exterior elevations drawn for it. Everything was in plan and sections. So let's just start going through these sections one at a time. This section, over here was the entry door, and then you walked in and there was the fireplace right over here, and the shingles that run from the outside just continue right inside. The glulam beam that starts from the outside continues in. This circle right over here and right here was done for a reason, that the rainwater would come to here, and without this, the wind would blow and stain the glulam beams so that this would be a different color than the inside. But with this circle here, which was a groove that was 20 millimeters deep cut into the glulam, when the rain came, the wind would blow it into the grooves and it wouldn't get past here. It would then drop down so that this area here would all eventually weather into a natural gray color, and this would be the same, the glulam beam here would be the same color as the glulam beam inside that's not being affected by weather. And when we get to the actual photographs, you'll see that. But downstairs here, this was a guest bedroom here, and this was, I think, right over here, was part of the wine cellar. I don't remember, but we can move on to the next section. This one's through the kitchen. So, we use the same glulam beam over and over again because there's an expense to make the shape, but once you have the form made, it doesn't cost you to keep on repeating it over and over again. This was his master bedroom suite, and you'll see everywhere materials from the outside continue on the inside and vice versa. I never mentioned upstairs, this was a pantry behind the kitchen area. Let's move on to the next section. This was a section cut through the meditation room, and then this is the large balcony where he would make ice cream on, and this was a very complex room to build. We'll just go through the section. This is a section through the study. So now you can see kind of the wine cellar here and how it's underground. Another section through the study and through one of the guest closet areas. So you kind of generally see, the forms of the house, that you have this curvature here that was set up to take advantage of not having a parallel surface between the ceiling and the floor to get better sound for music that he listened to all day long. And then the vocabulary just naturally continued to these curved elements that were just a continuation because everything's now tied into one basic composition. Well, we can go on to we'll go to this next two real quickly. We've seen these sections, so if you don't have any questions on them, now we can go through the pictures of the exterior and interior more slowly because we'll start to relate to things. So this is that entry drive coming down. This is the garage. The garage door looks almost invisible. And then you continue on this way to the entry courtyard. And you come through a gate and you come here, and then you'll turn and go this direction into the main part of the courtyard. You step up, you come into this area here, and there's a little Japanese garden on this side. And then when you turn to look this way, let's go to the next slide. First, if you look back towards where the garage is, that beam that was outside of the garage, it now continues all the way through this way here. But now if you turn directions, you're going to look towards the house itself. And you have this D shape, and that D is for what? It's D for door. And this is a pivot door that will pivot open so you can go in the house. But if you look here, you see the forms on the outside here. They continue all the way through back here into the meditation room, so that everything ties together. The materials that are in the inside here continue right out. There's a glass mirror that's peach color that if you go back a couple of slides real quickly. Well, you can see it right over here. It wraps around and it'll wrap and it'll go inside the house and come all the way around, and then the shingles that are outside, they'll wrap and come inside. The copper will come inside in places. So everything is one continuous composition, and how you make these transitions from one element to the next was all part of first year design that I hated with a passion that years later I realized was the only important class I had. But now we're in the inside, you have the entryway, you sit down, take your shoes off, the shingles from the outside continue in and they wrap around. So, here you're coming now into the living room space, but you see the forms come in, they wrap, this comes back down, this comes back down. There's high clear story windows here that open up because later on I'm going to show you where air comes in from shaded areas down below and then will come up and get sucked through from the high windows up above. So we can move on to the next one. So down below here, down in here, there's vents that open up to the airspace down below, and since the airspace down below, and I'll show it to you later, is in the shade, it's cool air that's coming into the house, and this is for summertime, and then it will go up and get sucked out by this high glass back here. Go back to the last slide for a moment. Here you can see the materials from the outside continuing right in, and you have this glass wall, and it almost looks like a 35-foot long glass wall, but it's made up of a lot of different pieces. You can see the glulam beam being the same color here and then starting to change color out there. So we can go to the next one here. You have kitchen, and then you have the meditation area. This back jumps back to where the study area is, and that light well, low windows, and on this side there will be the study area. Unfortunately, these are not in order, so we're jumping around because I'm not using the slideshow presentation, but you're seeing a lot more pictures this way. This was the meditation room and the large balcony and an area here where he could put his ice cream maker out and make ice cream. And the decking here just continuing wrapped up so that you'd have privacy from the next door neighbor, and you have that privacy. Here goes detail of the copper work, and here you can see the weathering effect starting. That you have the gray here, and eventually that gray will go all the way into here, but it won't go into here, and this will always stay that constant color. And just to give it a little bit of flair to it, I painted these things a light green color, the indentation areas there, which kind of plays on with a Northwest Native American motif. Okay, this is kind of the downhill side, and all this shingle work, you'll see that it'll continue into the house. It's hard to see, but down in here there's a line. Maybe we'll get to another photograph that'll show it better. We didn't have it that showed it, but maybe I'll see it someplace else. I like to cantilever things out because I like the feeling of floating and connecting to the airspace, and it would have been very easy to just put a column there and a column there, but I personally, like this feeling of grabbing the airspace and the landscape and tying the building together. So all the softness of this hillside, that's why all these curved forms were there, to just relate to that. But the curved forms really started from the inside and worked their way out. We can go to the next slide. Let's just keep on going. That didn't show too much. Okay, down right over here, there's this little space there, and that's the vent that allows the cooler air from down below to go up into the living room and then get sucked through to the upper side of the clear story windows on the other side of the room. And that was part of the cooling method, so that we didn't have to use air conditioning for the house. All that we had was radiant floor heating to heat the house. The meditation room also had a window seat in it. Just go back one real quickly. A window seat in it so you can, lie there and, read a book. But it was a circular room, and it was a complex room to do the drawings on to make it buildable. And what we did was we just blew up the drawings to full scale and put them down on plywood, and then just cut the shapes out and made a number of plywood ribs to get these different shapes. Well, we can go on now.